Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and video show which brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you won't miss a new episode. I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted and foremost privileged to have a conversation with Kay Firth-Butterfield. Kay, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Now, Kay, normally we introduce the person as complete as possible. In your case, that's going to mean I'm going to fill the whole show with just naming up what your background is. So some highlights. You are a barrister, a former judge and professor, technologist and entrepreneur. You're one of the foremost experts in the world on the governance of artificial intelligence, the reason we're going to talk. You are a member of the Executive Committee of the World Economic Forum. You're also the author of a couple of books on human rights, wrote numerous articles on the topic. You are recognized for your work for a number of awards and honors, including Forbes Women Defining the 21st Century AI Movement and the New York Times 10 Women Changing the Landscape of Leadership. Finally, you are also the world's first Chief Ethics Officer. A lot to cover in this session on The Brand Called You. It's okay. My honor, and so glad you're going to join us. You're joining us. Now, Kay, start easy before we backtrack how you got there, but you're now working for the World Economic Forum. Most people think, oh, that's Davos, but there's much more behind that. Could you take us a little bit what the World Economic Forum is all about?
Yes, surely. And it's good of you to give me this opportunity to explain the World Economic Forum, because as you say, everybody knows us for doing Davos, which is the great convening that we do now that the pandemic's over every January, every year, and have been doing since the 1970s. But there's a lot more to the forum than just Davos. And our mission is to improve the state of the world, and obviously we do that in various ways. So people will, for example, know the Global Risks Report and some of the other big reports that we put out each year. What do? I lead the artificial intelligence team at the forum, and we are working all the time with governments, businesses, civil society and academics to think through some of the thorny issues, for example, around AI governance. What does it actually mean? Not to just say the words responsible AI, but actually to be able to create policies in your company or your government that bring responsible AI into being. We also do a lot of work around thinking about applications of artificial intelligence. So, for example, how should law enforcement use facial recognition technology? Or how would you wisely use AI in healthcare? They're all really big topics and they all need work around them. And then just recently, we've been thinking about how do you use AI to think about climate change, particularly adaptation. Where are the people going to be living in the future? How can governments use AI to make sensible plans around the future? And also businesses as well.
Yeah, by the way, that actually reminds me of the AI for Good movement, where people are looking at how AI can help develop the Sustainability Development Goals.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the World Economic Forum. That's your role. The Brand Called You. When you meet somebody for the first time, how do you introduce yourself? Who are you? And what's the first thing you would like to share with your audience?
Well, obviously, at the moment, I'm head of artificial intelligence at the World Economic Forum. But that, I guess, if you were to say, what's in your heart, Kay, the golden thread that runs through that really different, circuitous career that I've had is really my desire to help humanity and the planet succeed in the future. So, you know, as a lawyer, I was a human rights lawyer, so I was helping people more one person at a time to hopefully enjoy their human rights. And now I would say that what I'm trying to do is help businesses, governments really make sure that we access the future in a safe and responsible fashion.
Okay. Now, people who listen to or watch this podcast will then question, hey, first a barrister, then we have AI, and then all of a sudden we have, let's say, policy development. So that doesn't seem to be a linear path. So how do you transition from being a barrister, a judge, to an AI expert?
Sure. And I think that what you have to do is to think about that golden thread that runs through it all.
Yeah.
So I was a barrister for very many years. As I say, I used to do commercial law as well, but my heart was always in the helping people, the working with kids, the human rights piece. And then I became a judge. And in the UK, fortunately, you sit part-time, you become a part-time judge, and you have this opportunity to decide whether you want to be a judge, whether you like it, and also whether they think you're any good at it. So it works very well for both sides. Most people, it is the ultimate stage of their career as a barrister, and they stay as a judge. I just knew it wasn't me. And so at that stage, at the pinnacle of my career, I had to say, well, what am I going to do next? And I was fortunate enough to be able to move to the United States and become a professor. Mm-hmm. And that really gave me that pause in my career and my life that so many people don't have. And it was that allowed me to look and say, okay, I'm here. What's my interest? Where is the future going? And to fuse the conversations that I have with my husband, who's a computer scientist, and we had been having around artificial intelligence and the future, with the past, which is my legal background. So I sort of became known for having this understanding of AI and law. Is a very short hop into policy from there.
Okay, so your spouse actually put you on the path of looking at AI, or
yeah, well, we both had an interest in artificial intelligence. So I think, you know, I would say that his PhD is in computer science with AI, and my interest probably has always been more about society and AI. And I would say that I could probably trace it to first reading The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil all those years back.
Okay. How optimistic are you about the future related to AI? Is it a blessing? Is it something else?
I think ultimately, it should be a blessing for us. Mm-hmm. We just have a lot of things to iron out in terms of governance. I am slightly worried as we go into what is perhaps a 10-year recession, that, and we see that in certainly the global north, there is a decreasing trust in technology generally, that we might have a slowdown in adoption. We might have a slowdown in the number of startups that are out there because funding's drying up. We're seeing already, you know, some of the big tech companies having hiring freezes or actually laying people off. So I do have a sort of a short term or a 10-year maybe worry about how we're going to navigate that. But I think if you look at all the benefits that AI can bring to humanity, can bring to the climate, and as you said, SDGs generally, I still verge on the side of hope rather than sadness around the technology.
Okay, so an optimistic future, but what is your take on Stephen Hawking, who warned us about AI could spell the end of the human race, was one of his quotes.
Yeah, sure. And I think that we should worry about that. Yeah. And that was also written with Max Tegmark and Stuart Russell. And I think it's really the work that Stuart Russell, for example, is doing in thinking about what the non-technical term off switch looks like. Yeah. Is actually incredibly important. And anybody who wants to know more about that, I really advise them to go and read about some of the work that he's been doing, thinking about it. We need people who are as bright as those guys to make sure that we are on the right track in terms of how we develop artificial intelligence. Okay. I think there are, but I think there are also so many benefits that we need to look at. How do we govern? How do we ensure that the technology itself is safe? And so all the work that I do, I guess, is to make sure that we don't end up with Stephen's most worrying take on what the future of humanity looks like.
Okay, point taken. It's very powerful technology. We need to understand it. We need to be able to govern it. And I like the idea of we need an off switch.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And as I say, Stuart's been doing some really fascinating work on that.
Good. I'll definitely have to invite him for the program as well.
You should.
Yes. Yeah, we should. Well, I'll ask him indeed. Now, I was just wondering, given your honors and awards, you are very much seen as a role model. Do you accept that, being a role model? Is that a burden, or is that something which actually helps you?
I think it helps you to be seen as a leader in the field, because it enables you to, for example, be invited to be on a podcast like this, which then enables me to talk to people that I wouldn't normally be able to reach. And that's so important, because the more that people understand about artificial intelligence, its benefits and its problems, the better the conversation, the more robust the conversation we can have. And so from that perspective, it's excellent. I think the Brit in me is still rather reluctant to admit that I would have this status. But also, I think it is wonderful for women who are in this area to be able to see that there are women. You know, one of the things that we at Davos, we always try to do a 50-50 women and men on panels. It's so hard because there are not women so much in the C-suite. There are not women so much at the top of government. So wherever we women can actually have a seat at the table, can be seen as role models, then that's so useful for the girls that come after us.
Okay. Now, when the New York Times names you 10 women changing the landscape of leadership, do you know what you are changing and how you are changing that landscape? Is that AI related, or is that something else?
I was chosen because of the work that I've been doing around governance in artificial intelligence, because you probably remember that maybe 10 years ago now, there were a handful of us thinking about these things. And now we do, companies have set up responsible AI units, and there is a global conversation around whether to regulate, whether to govern, etc. And so there's that lead. I think that they saw that leadership piece as actually important, because it's about creating a movement that actually has now born or is now bearing fruit.
Okay, because I was wondering to what extent it also relates to the fact that you are the world's first chief ethics officer.
Yeah, so Chief AI Ethics Officer, in fact.
Yeah.
Yes.
And how did that go about?
Well, that's one of those things, freak stories that change your life. So I was Stephen Hawking, Stuart Russell and Max had written that piece in the Times on the 1st of May of 2014, I think. And a week later, maybe just a few days later, I sat on an airplane from London to Austin in Texas. It's a 10-hour flight. And I sat next to a guy who was CEO of a startup in AI. He had read that article because he'd been in London. And I was at that stage one of a handful of people in the world that he could have talked to about that article and had any sense made, you know.
Serendipity.
And so serendipity stepped in. 10 hours of, it's the longest interview in the world of anybody, I imagine, but 10 hours later, he asked me if I would go to work for him.
And you did.
And I did.
Wow. Without going too much into what a chief ethics officer does, it is a world's first. So it has, paved the way to, hey, thinking about the ethical side of technology. And being an engineer myself, when I was studying as an engineer 40 years ago, I would say the soft side was a non-issue. We did not talk about it. It wasn't irrelevant. And what I'm observing, what you're saying is, look, and I understand how your background comes into place, is we need to also understand the human side of technology, its implementation. And that's what you're trying to share with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's just more important with artificial intelligence because artificial intelligence is the underpinning for just about everything that we are going to be doing. And a lot of what we are doing, but just about everything that we will be doing. So whether we're sending autonomous robots into space, whether we are, God forbid, using autonomous robots as lethal autonomous weapons, or whether we're using it for good in drug discovery, etc. And more so that we're now talking about the metaverse. The metaverse is nothing without AI. Yeah. And so it's just different from from the tech that we've built in the past, because this is in every part of our lives. It's serving us for good. It's undermining our democracy in certain places as well. So it's just important that everybody understands AI, and it's important that we think about how we make sure that it goes well for us.
Okay, now the World Economic Forum has identified we are in the 4th industrial wave. We are in the cyber-physical wave. Mm-hmm. The way you describe it seems like AI is actually opening up a 5th industrial wave beyond this 4th. Or is that a compare?
I think it depends how you want to see it. I mean, yes, I think that AI enables us to have another industrial revolution. What that looks like, we don't know yet, but it might be centered around the metaverse, for example, or Web3. But you could also just say that it is the 4th industrial revolution, and it will forever be a continuance of it, because what we see in the 4th industrial revolution is this thing called artificial intelligence that has the potential to drive everything that we do and liberate us from having to work, for example, and enable us to get to space in ways that we can't imagine at the moment.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is anybody out there, read up on what AI is, because you're all already using it and it's only going to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, your kids are going to be working with it. Yeah. You are probably, depending upon whether you're as old as me, you're going to be working with it. And so understanding the pros and the cons, having a view, not having your leaders on one side saying AI is going to put you out of jobs, or on the other side saying AI is going to be brilliant for you. Having a view and being part of the debate is so important for everybody's future.
Got it. Now, as mentioned and discussed, you are a role model in this area because of your work with AI. Are there any people or organizations which inspire you, which are your role models?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, Stuart Russell he is one of the very first scientists who actually started to say, along with Max and Stephen, that this was a great tool, but there were some problems with it. And there are still a lot of people creating artificial intelligence who don't see that. And so I think Stuart is a huge role model for me, or a hero, I guess. The person who is my personal hero is, of course, my mother, who, you know, without whom I would never have been on the trajectory I have been. And I think it's really, really important when we are parents to make sure that we ensure our children have the freedom to know that they can do whatever they need to do. So my daughter's a pilot in the US Air Force, another job that not very many girls get to do. And so, yeah, parents are just really important.
So true, being a role model. Now, you just already mentioned to me, share with me, that you discussed AI with your husband. How often at the dinner table do you discuss your work at home? Is that what you leave at the office, or is this a topic you share?
I wish I left it at the office, because I wouldn't work 24/7 if I did. But I think that, well, a number of things, you know, everybody in my team and everyone that I know working in this area knows that we should actually have done something about this back then. And so now we're all running to catch up. It's been an absolute pleasure just recently to work on quantum and create the first ethical principles for quantum, because we're actually ahead instead of in this behind phase. I think that, you know, we're all very dedicated, and we care.
Okay, that's the office team. That's the office team. But how?
That's the office team. Yeah. So of course, when I'm at home, I'm talking about these things with my husband, and I would hope that gradually everybody starts to talk about what the future of humanity looks like with their spouses or their kids or whatever. So yes, it's a frequent topic of discussion because it's everywhere. So yes, just yesterday, I'm in a different location today from my spouse. So just yesterday, he sent me an article about the use of license plate readers by law enforcement in America to control women seeking abortions. You know, that's something we should all be talking about.
Wow, that's a complete session on its own, to be honest. So I'm going to park there because a couple of, I'd say, more personal questions I'd like to ask you. You've had such a stellar career so far. Have there in that career been any hiccups, any mistakes, failures? Well, okay, I've learned from this and I've moved on.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Gosh, you wouldn't be human unless there'd be mistakes. But I think the main thing that I have learned and that I would pass on to people is to be your authentic self. one of the things about being a barrister or starting your career in a particular field is that you've chosen it and you think that that's the be all and end all of something. But actually, if you allow yourself to grow and yourself to be open-minded and yourself to be authentic, then sometimes your career is going to lead you in a completely different route. And so, yes, that would be my tip for the future.
Yeah, but you've learned something as a barrister, as a judge, and then I could say technical background, entrepreneur. In your current role, what has been the most relevant experience and expertise you bring to the table currently?
I would say everything that I have done previously, because they pile on one another. And as I say, there is that golden thread that runs through them all. Obviously, my legal background enables me to understand policy and regulation really well. But my background in thinking about human rights, human trafficking, that helps me to think about, well, how would you solve this for the betterment of humanity? So, for example, in the UK, there's this great law that requires governments to have a human trafficking statement each year and look through their supply chains and things like that. And that's possibly a mechanism that we could think about using for AI governance. What are you doing in responsible AI? You need to make an annual statement. So it's sort of picking up the threads from all these different pieces of my career that actually, I think, helps me to be successful in my current position.
It's all coming together, seems like.
Hopefully.
Hey, two more questions, Kay. First of all, what does success mean to you? How do you define success in your work and your private life?
Yeah, so I don't think I think about success in my private life. I think if I had thought a lot about success in my private life and defined it as money, which so many people do, I would never have been a human rights barrister. I'd have been a banking lawyer or something like that. So what counts as success in my work career? Adoption. So there's no point in us doing work and then nobody adopting it. There's no point in us doing work and nobody thinking about these things for themselves. And so the sort of thing that makes me happy is, for example, when we have been working, as I said, on law enforcement and facial recognition. And that's now being adopted by Interpol in 190 countries. It looks as if it will in part become a standard, which will be integral to the European AI Act. That's what I think about as success, that we have actually moved the needle in a positive way for millions of people.
Making impact.
Mm-hmm.
Making impact.
Yeah.
Hey, got that. Hey, I have to ask this. You just described a world dominated by AI.
Mm-hmm.
Does that also mean that coming January in Davos, AI is going to be the main topic?
I don't think AI will be the main topic. I'm not the programming team, so I can't decide what is going to be the main topic. But I think what you will see is actually all the things that AI will influence as the main topics. So you will see AI, you will see metaverse, you will see climate, you will see the recession, the global recession, obviously, as a topic of conversation. You will see the geopolitics of technology there as well. And, in healthcare, you'll see AI. So yes, I would always say AI will be everywhere in any discussion.
Okay, so over the next couple of months, they will find you and realize in all those topics you just mentioned, hey, there's going to be this AI component in there, because that, I mean, the United Nations does call this the decade of execution, and sees information technology, AI, as one of the key elements in providing solutions for a better world. So
Yeah.
it's going to be aligned with that. Hey, final question. How do you want people to remember you?
I would like people to remember me as the woman who tried to ensure that we got it right. And who genuinely believes that we need to get it right together, and nobody has the secret sauce. We can build the secret sauce together.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.